So everyone, and welcome to the probably final part of the level design of Hat in Time. So today we're gonna take a look at the last big chapter of the game, obviously, which is for a lot of people a very exciting chapter, the Alpine Skyline. Now, I've already done the intro to Alpine Skyline. I don't think you can do it twice. But at least I have to say that the intro to Alpine Skyline, it does actually, once again, add a nice little spin to what you usually think about an intro of. So usually for all the other stages, you go into the stage and what happens is, okay, you just start the first act, and the act like has a specific task that you need to do. And then it shows you like, hey, for example, go down that path, or do this, do that. It pretty much already tells you or guides you towards the way of where the task is. But in here, the first, you just go in, it says free roam. Huh, that's odd. There's no real direct task that you immediately are shown towards. So you just feel like, huh, that's weird. There's no acts here. So you think of free roam and you feel like, okay, maybe this stage is more open, like for example, like Banjo-Kazooie stages, like Poi stages, like yooka-laylee stages, in general, any of those games, maybe even to some degree like Super Mario 64 stages, even though those do have different acts, but you know what I mean. Unlike, for example, Chapter 2, where every stage is different, or Chapter 3, where you always really just guided towards where to go immediately, not really even given too much of an ambiguity as to what the actual way to go is. It's pretty obvious what to do. But here, the free roam aspect does make everything quite a bit interesting. And so you start that stage, you go into that intro area, and it does feel a bit odd right towards the start, because I feel like you can get, not disoriented, but maybe a bit surprised or caught off guard as to what it actually is you're supposed to do. Of course, you just want to walk forward, I guess, and climb the first mountain you see, I guess, but there's not really that big of a sense behind what you're doing. You're doing what you're doing not because the game pretty much tells you that you're supposed to do this to get a timepiece. You're doing it because you want to explore, you want to find out what it is about this stage that makes it so unique, because you're getting intrigued by that free roam stuff that it says at the start. It says free roam, and it probably intrigues you a bit. So, intrigued by that, you press on, you open that first gate with the hookshot, making sure that you actually do have the hookshot, because the hookshot is pretty much hard required for everything that's happening in here. Because without the hookshot, how are you supposed to go to all these different places? Because you need the hookshot to grab onto these skylines and then have these skylines transport you along. Can't do that without a hookshot. So make sure you have the hookshot. I just showed off right when the video started, you can actually get to this stage without hookshot, but the very first gate that you have to open in that stage requires hookshot. And I know you can jump over the gate, but there's an invisible wall behind that gate, so even if you do jump over the gate, in order to get rid of that invisible wall, you will have to use the hookshot. People are singing very loudly outside, even though it's 1 AM, and I'm in the inner city. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So you open that gate, you climb up this hill. It's very windy, it's a bit harsh. You're like, oh, this must be, you know, the final stage of the game is obviously a more unwelcoming stage. Probably everything's a lot more sinister, more intense, probably. You know, in a lot of games with the final stage is the most sinister of them all, where you have like big lava mountains and stuff rains from the sky and very tough enemies and everything. And in this game, it kind of seems like this at the start, where everything's a bit windy and there's some enemies around, and it seems a bit intense, a bit sinister. And then you go all the way up to the top, you open up, or you operate that one thing, whatever that is, where you hit those 3 different objects, and after that there's some really, really amazing like sequence that happens after that, where the clouds they get a bit more quiet, and it shows you the way forward with this skyline that gets rappelled down, and then you go on that skyline, you break through the clouds, and oh, there's the big stage. Really amazing, really great, I like it. So that's a really nice intro to the stage, and after that it's like, oh, now the actual stage begins, and the actual stage is a lot more friendly, a lot more welcoming than the initial part might seem like, and I do enjoy that sort of fake out that the overall stage is actually pretty much like most of the other, like, I would say chapter 1 and 2 that are more welcoming, more happy. Stage 3 is a bit dark, I guess. It's actually really dark, with like snatcher kids being hung at nooses or whatever. But at least this stage is very, very bright, cheerful, colorful, like it. And it's a good intro towards the start. So after you get to the intro, you're on this first bit of stage piece right here. It's this set piece. Not really a set piece, it's just a part of the level where you're on this central island. I know a lot of people that when they came into here, they were maybe a tiny bit overwhelmed, which is alright because it's free roam. But it actually turns out that even though it might feel maybe a little bit overwhelming, like, oh my god, I need to figure out where everything is now because it's like a free roam stage, and I need to make sure I don't get lost, and oh, where do I go? But the way the stage is actually built up is that it makes sure that this first island that you're on it actually isn't actually that big. This first island that you're on is not actually that big. If you start walking around here, in just a handful of minutes, you will have seen this entire central island. You can talk to guys here, you can walk around the outer edge multiple times and go around in a circle fairly quickly. You can't actually climb the mountain in the middle too much, because it's not actually that large. Like, there's like a bit of a lower area, and right now I'm going towards a bit of a big higher area, but you don't actually have that much freedom to roam around here, which is very intended because you're supposed to find this horn, and then you blow the horn, and at that point it's like, okay, now you've gone through the tutorial for this stage pretty much. I like it when games have their own, or stages rather, have their own individual tutorial to start the stage out with, that pretty much tells you what the stage is supposed to be like, gives you a good entrance into the stage, not just visually but also gameplay wise, and you get a better understanding for everything that's happening. So then you make it into the stage, you blow the horn, and you see how all these different skylines, they extend all to all these different places. And also, very importantly, tells you that the island that you're on right now is complete. Interesting. This is something that you haven't seen in any other place, where it randomly tells you, or it suddenly tells you that, hey, what you've done right now in this area, you've completed this area now, you're done in this area. And I think that's something that is very important for this stage to have, that it tells you that an area is complete, because there's many different of these individual islands that all have like 1 or 2 important things on them. And if you were really trying to get a complete picture of every single island here and be like, okay, I want to get every single treasure, blow every single horn, find out everything there is to find out about the stage, it can get extremely overwhelming when you just pick a skyline. I'm just going to pick up Skyline right here, and then you just make it to one of these islands, and it feels like every single one of these islands you're going to have to go through like their own singular adventure and exploration to figure out where everything is. But because it tells you at some point, okay, you're done, I think that's a really good way of making sure the player doesn't get stuck in the same area for too long. Basically telling the player that, okay, what you came to this island for, you've completed it, good job. You can now go to the next area to make sure that the player doesn't get stuck trying to do similar stuff on the same island for too long, and that could get very frustrating. So it's actually, in my opinion, very important that that does happen, that player does get told that they're done in these areas. Very important, in my opinion. So now all these different areas, I like also that they all have their own sort of theme to it. Of course, not all of them are completely original between each other, but if you just pick one of these islands and you just go around, you run around from island to island, pick another skyline, pick another direction completely, you do notice that stuff is different. It's not just the same island like 20 times. Like, sure, you will see the same sort of doodads used, the same sort of enemies, maybe same sort of buildings all over the place, but it's okay because I still feel like the different islands are distinct enough where it feels different to play it. Now, surely they're not distinct enough where after playing all of them, you could internally visualize each of these different stages. Like, they do sort of blend together a little bit in your mind, so they're not perfectly different between each other, but I still feel like they make a good job of, at least when you play for the very first time, you've just went to this island for the first time, it doesn't feel like, oh, I've seen all of this before, this is boring. It does at least feel fresh when you do it for the first time, and that's something that I like, at least. Even though if you've gone through all of them, they do kind of blend together a little bit. So now we have all these different directions to choose from, and all these different directions, they get you to different main timepieces. There's 4 main directions to pick for different timepieces, and all of these have their own different, like, almost dungeon, I would say, at the end of this. Like their own timepiece dedicated segment. For example, you have the Twilight Bell over there. Now, in order to get to, for example, the Twilight Bell or to any of the other locations, you first need to go through a few other islands, and on these islands you will usually have to find a horn, blow it, and then go and take that new path that you've just opened up, and then go to the big area, for example, in this case, the Twilight Bell. Now, the way there is, for the most part, gameplay-wise, fairly similar between them. You are presented with an island. You start out most of the time at the bottom of this island. It has some mountain sides on top of it, and you're basically tasked with trying to figure out how am I going to climb this mountain to get to the treasure or the horn that I'm trying to get to, which is usually at the top. There might be some differences now here and there, like some islands here's a bit more of like these lines that you jump on and you balance on and jump off of, these like wash lines or whatever they are, and now here's a bit more where you have to do with hook shots, here's a bit more where you have to do with spiders, now here's one where you have cats that try and steal your stuff. Like, there are different things on the islands, but usually the goal that you're trying to accomplish remains the same. Get to the top of whatever it is, or to the other side of it, usually one of those or a combination of the two, and that's where you'll find what you're waiting for, and then you can go towards the next island. Now, at the end of all of these paths, the actual paths, I wouldn't say that the paths are too eventful themselves, because the gameplay is fairly similar. You just climb upwards a bunch, maybe you find a few enemies, stuff like that. It's nothing too special, but it is enjoyable, at least doing it the first time. Maybe now that I've played through the entire stage once, if I were to play for the entire stage again, it might get a little bit tedious going through all these different islands again, and even though I know the islands now, it might still get a bit annoying going through all the different islands, because I've seen all of them already and the gameplay on them is not too special. But the thing is, you can actually get through them fairly quickly because they're all fairly small, so you can sort of speedrun them a little bit, even though if you're just playing it casually for the second time, you can still get through them fairly quickly, and that's at least making sure that you don't get bored when you're doing it the second time. Like, for example, this is an island where you use the Dweller Mask a lot, which is important because the next area coming up, the Twilight Bell, does use the Dweller Mask quite a bit. It might actually be possible to... No, actually, it's not possible to beat it without Dweller Mask. There's one place where you do definitely need a Dweller Mask in the Twilight Bell, but okay. So make sure you have the Dweller Mask, and it uses the different other things around the Dweller Mask, which is the like weird bell things that you can attack, and then they give off that sort of weird thing, this like radius. So you go for that little island, it tells you about, hey, Dweller Masks exist, say it's important that you know how the bells work, and then you make it all the way to the Twilight Bell. I'm not going to go in right now, but at this point, once you've reached one of these 4 main areas, you're presented with, it's, I want to say dungeon, because to some degree it is, where you have this like big building or area, and it's like, okay, you're going to have to do some puzzles here and there, maybe do a tiny bit of backtracking now and then. It kind of feels like a puzzle, like a big dungeon, and you go through that, and at the very end you get awarded with a timepiece, and that does feel pretty nice. So for example, that was the Twilight Bell area, making sure you got all the different tools you need to use and know how to use them, as it should be, as a game should do. This is something that you won't notice too much. If the game does it right, like I said in my last part as well, if a game doesn't do it right, it becomes very obvious. So now we're going, for example, to the birdhouse, where I think there's more cat-like areas, and also more bird areas. I guess more lofty over here. We've got some lines, we've got some grapples, some jumps, stuff like that. More befitting of birds, I would say. And what else do we have? We also have these branching lines. Whatever, there's branching lines, those exist. They didn't need to be there, but whatever. Now, what else is there to say about the different islands? I think actually, I should have said this earlier, but this is actually a stage where I think there's not actually too much for me to say about level design wise, because it is a cool concept that has been used fairly effectively in a stage, and I don't think it does anything too badly, but at the same time I don't think it does anything too amazingly. Like, I like the way the area looks, I like the way the area plays and feels, but I don't think it's anything too far out of this world. Like, most of the gameplay that I'm doing right now, running around, feels fairly standard. It doesn't feel like I'm doing anything too special. That's what I mean. It's not like I'm doing something really special, like, for example, in Chapter 3, where, for example, there's the subcon well, where the water is rising. I need to outrun the water, but not really. And I've just got the hookshot, so I'm using the hookshot, and I'm learning how to do it while climbing up this well. Or you have the, what is it, for example, the boss fights, for example. There's not actually any boss fight in here, which is interesting. Or you have also in Subcon Forest, where you have to deliver all the different mails. That's a different style of gameplay, pretty much. But here, for the most part, in all these different areas, it's just you are in point A, go to point B. That's pretty much it for most of these areas. There's not really anything too big else to it. Like, of course, every now and then you use your abilities in a certain way, but like I said, for the most part, the actual goal of what you're doing is just getting from point A to point B. Nothing too special. So now that we've deliberated on the different islands, which I think there's nothing too much to say about them. Like I said, they are alright. They don't do anything too badly, they don't do anything too out of this world. Just fairly standard but enjoyable gameplay. And that's totally alright. It's just more content that doesn't feel like it's overstaying its welcome. It's alright. What else do we have? So now the different islands. We have, for example, the windmill over here, where the windmill is even more of what we're doing in all these different islands, but in an advanced way. So instead of just climbing a mountain very quickly from a small island to blow a horn or get a treasure or whatever, now we're climbing a very big like windmill with all these different moving parts, and it feels a lot more methodical when you're doing all these different jumps between all these moving platforms. I really like how that feels, because it always feels like, oh, there's some jumps where maybe I can jump ahead a little bit. Like if you're a speedrunner, you can skip a lot of the jumps, and it feels really nice when you're climbing up that giant windmill and you're skipping so much of it all the time by just jumping between platforms that maybe you feel like you weren't supposed to jump between. That feels good. So you can do that. Also, it has a few mini puzzles. Like all these different areas in here have a few mini puzzles in them, apart from maybe Fire Cake, which in my opinion is probably the most uninteresting part of this entire stage. I know a lot of other people like it because lol, Fire Cake, but I think game design wise or level design wise, I think the Fire Cake is not actually super interesting. It's alright. I'm not gonna say it's bad. Nothing in the stage is really bad at all, but I would say at least out of the four, it's, in my opinion, probably the weakest, and after that I would say Birdhouse, probably. I think Windmill is probably the strongest, and then there's Twilight Bell on number 2. That's at least my personal rating for them, though other people might disagree. I know a lot of people probably like Lava King more than I do, but whatever. So what else was I talking about? Yeah, I was talking about the windmill. So the windmill has this like really methodical climb and all these different moving parts, which is a really nice feeling. I think if you fall too far, you actually get voided out. So I don't think you can jump down the entire thing immediately and lose all your progress. And I think there's like tiny stages in them between them where you can kind of get caught on anyway. So I don't actually think it's ever too punishing, which is good. If it was really punishing, that would be really terrible. Like, imagine if you could fall down the entire thing of it when you're close towards the end. You just fall down the entire windmill. How terrible would that be? Ugh. Not very nice at all. But that's not the case, so it's good. You also have the Twilight Bell. The Twilight Bell feels quite a bit like... I've said this myself when I first played that stage, or I thought about it at least. I don't know if I said it out loud when I was doing my playthrough. But the Twilight Bell, in my opinion, feels a lot like a Wind Waker dungeon. And I think a lot of other people have had similar ideas about this. Just the way the graphics look, the way some of the effects look, it feels a bit Wind Waker-y, I would say. Like a Zelda the Wind Waker. And that's totally fine. I think it plays pretty nice. I really like the way everything looks, how different it is from the rest of the stage, where suddenly, like, you've been jumping over all these different mountain tops and on all these floating islands, but now suddenly you're in this weird, ethereal, otherworldly dimension inside this weird bell, where you're going around doing stuff with platforms that are from out of this dimension that shift and phase in and out of dimension. It's really weird, but really cool as well. So it really feels really different, and I like that. And the gameplay is also really different. The gameplay is also a lot more methodical, probably the most methodical gameplay in the entire game, probably, where you have to do some sort of puzzles even. Like, this is obviously also probably the most puzzly area in the entire game, where you have to, at some points, really try and figure out what it is you want to do. Like, for example, there's a gate that's being held up by this, like, otherworldly essence, and you need to use your Dweller Mask correctly to push the gate up and go underneath, while in a different spot you're trying to make the gate fall all the way down by erasing the platform beneath it, stuff like that. And you have to do stuff with all these different bells that erase stuff in and out of existence around them in a certain area. It's very methodical. It feels very puzzly, feels like a dungeon. You're also collecting keys. It is a dungeon. It pretty much is a dungeon. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a Wind Waker dungeon. And it's really different from all the different stuff, and I really like it. I really like it. Feels very nice to go through. Then we also have the birdhouse. Now, the birdhouse is more about finding your way around, like keeping your eye out where all the different paths are, trying to find the correct paths between all the different paths that you can choose, while trying to also make sure that you have to, also make sure that you dodge all the different enemies. Like, there's some really tough enemies, and with tough I mean annoying enemies in that place. Like, for example, you have the eggshells, which are probably the worst enemy in the entire game. Mostly because they function so differently from all the different enemies in the game, which in itself is alright. Just a pain to deal with, an absolute pain to deal with. Ugh, I don't like him at all. I really don't like those guys at all, but whatever, they're there, I guess. Not gonna critique them too harshly, but in my opinion, it could have been done a bit differently, that they're not quite that much of a pain in the arse, but yeah, whatever. So that gameplay in the birdhouse, I wouldn't say the birdhouse has anything too special. I mean, it has the actual enemies, which can't really be found anywhere else. I think they can found in the time rift, 1 or 2 time rifts on here, but that's about it. For the most part, they can't really be found anywhere. What else do we have? So yeah, the birdhouse is actually not that interesting in my opinion. I think it's fairly uneventful. You just jump around a bit, find your way around, which is alright. It's alright gameplay, but like as I said, nothing too special. You also have the windmill. You also have the lava cake. I think the reason I don't like the lava cake too much is because the main gimmick of the lava cake is, well, you have different stages of the lava cake where you can jump up. You keep going up and up and up, and it's like different tiers, but every single tier is like, okay, here's some lava, you go in a circle around over that lava, and there's some platforms that rise in and out of the lava. And I mean, in the grand book of ways to make level design interesting, rising platforms out of lava are probably on the pages that talk about the less inspired game mechanics. Like, rising platforms out of lava it's just very formulaic, not very interesting in my opinion. It's very simple gameplay that is very easy to get around with, very easy to play that sort of style of stage. Unless you're really bad at the game, you're not gonna have a problem with it at all. Like when I first played that stage, I was actually speedrunning the lava cake pretty much because I just skipped half of the platform, over half of the platforms that are rising in and out of the lava. I just jumped over them because I really didn't care about them, and it didn't actually matter too much what sort of cycle you were on. So it was very easy as well. It's really easy, and it's not very eventful, not very unique. That's why, in my opinion, the lava cake, it's a cool idea to have like a big cake of lava with different tiers. That's cool, but that's about it. That's all the lava cake has to offer, in my opinion. Which, in my opinion, it's maybe not the best, but it's once again, it has a bit of contrast and variety compared to all these different stages. So it does have its own name to it, pretty much, and that's at least something. Like I said, it's not bad. It's alright. I would say it's alright, and that's cool. Now, something else about the stage, now that I talked about all the different main timepieces, there's also different areas in this stage where you have areas that don't actually lead to any timepieces, and you also have these NPCs that tell you, like, hey, this is not going to lead to any timepieces. You don't need to do this. Like it keeps saying, I think it doesn't lead to any, what does it say? I don't know exactly what they say. They don't say timepieces, they say something else. I do like that they're telling the player, like, hey, this place right here is for bonus. You can go here, you can get some bonus stuff, but don't expect there to be anything too important here. It's just bonus, you know, it's special. And I like it that they're basically telling you that. If they didn't, it might get a lot more confusing for some players, because even though it's free roam, the game still wants to make sure that you're having a good time knowing where stuff is. It doesn't want you to get lost, like completely lost, trying to figure out what the main objective is. You should always have an idea of where the main objective is, even in a free roam area, and that's good. That's some good game design sense right there. Now you have these different side areas where you're not quite sure exactly how expansive they are, if they have side paths. Like for example, I've gone through this area right here now. What if there's now some other place where I could hook myself onto a skyline and go somewhere completely different? I don't know that. Let's figure it out. So you can explore these side paths to your liking as well. You can find other side paths that link away from the side paths. You can find cool themed areas as well. Like there's this place where you have to use the time slow badge area. Not badge, it used to be a badge, I think. The time slow hat, which is really cool. I really like the time slow hat. The visual effect for this hat is amazing. I really like the visual effect for this, and all the, you can like slightly see how in the middle of the air there's like these clocks whizzing around, which is really cool effect. Really like that as well. And that is a themed area. Oh, sorry. It's a themed area that uses that, which is really good. And I think that's mostly it about the stage. I don't know what it is, but this stage is probably the most expansive, the longest of them all, the most different from all the other stages, probably. Actually, stage chapter 2 is also really different from the rest, because most of them are pretty much their own stage, all the different acts, but yeah. I think that's actually about it, yeah. Cut. Yeah, I was thinking about anything else that I could talk about, but I think I'm at the end here. So yeah, also thanks. I started off hanging out, but you know, about to end it. Yeah, that was the end of this. And I talked about all the other ones for like 15 minutes, but this one's only like half an hour. That's because, I mean, the stage is the most expansive, it is the biggest, but I think the ideas that have been worked into the stage have been used to create a lot of space, but the general ideas behind them are mostly the same. And now I don't want to go too in-depth here. I could go in-depth really and talk a lot about all the different islands, but I think that's not what people watch it for. I don't want to go for just this island and say, okay, what does this island do? This island makes sure that blah 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 and this happens. I think what's more important is the overall ideas behind all of the different islands, see what the islands actually do, how they work between each other, how they work with the main timepieces, how all of that stuff works. Then looking at all the exact level design. And the level design for most of these islands are pretty much the same. Like I said, you're at the bottom of some place that you want to climb, and then it's just various ways of climbing up that place. You can even try and break some stuff. This probably doesn't work, but I mean, it could have. So stuff like that you can do. But that's been repeated a lot. And like I said, maybe the only thing that I would say maybe about the stage that I don't like quite as much is how it does get a little bit samey after a while. Like I said, when I was done playing the stage, I felt like it was still alright. But if there were a few more islands, I think I would have gotten sick of it after sometimes if there were more islands. But I think this number of islands is about right. I didn't quite get sick of it in the end. But now in like second or third playthroughs, it might get a little bit tedious to play through all these islands again. And all of them are so similar. But yeah. But yeah, I think that was about it. If you have, as always, if you have anything to comment on, if you think like I missed to talk about something, you can always leave a comment below. And yeah, that was really fun. If you guys want to see more, next up I'm going to do some challenge runs. Probably starting tomorrow. Like I've already done one yesterday where I played for the game with no hats, which is fairly standard. Playing for the game with no hats is not even that difficult. But now I'm going to try to do some other stuff, like playing the game without pressing the X button, stuff like that. I'm going to start with that tomorrow, so you will see a lot more of that on my channel as well. So yeah, if you're in for that, subscribe. And yeah, that was that. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. And sorry, my start